Thank you, Anupama. Thank you for a wonderful start. First of all, very good morning to all of you. I feel so honored and excited to be part of this workshop, skill development program, basically. Uh, for a lot of reasons, I've been coming to this department of statistics for a while now, but this is the first time that I'll be talking about research methodology here. Also, I've been primarily teaching with business management students, working in the areas of primary research and secondary research. But I think this would be a more diverse audience, and I hope I will be able to make some contribution to your research. Before I start talking about research design, let me have a brief profile, at least of the of you all that are physically present. I don't think our online participants, will I be able to communicate with them as well? They can communicate with chat. Okay. Okay. So basically, we are research. Let's have raise of hands to see how many of us are research scholars. Majorly. Okay. Anybody who's not a research scholar? No. Okay. And you are? Your background is you teacher, student, research scholar? No. You are a teacher, master student. Okay. And you are? Faculty. Faculty member. All right. Right. So, when I start with research design, I am aware that you had one session yesterday. You had probably an introduction to research in some sort you would have had, and you also had, I'm told, sessions on research methodology. So research design and research methodology sometimes may overlap, and sometimes you would feel that we did this yesterday, but we will still try to focus on research design, and I will try to create a difference and probably try to add something new to something that you have a takeaway from it. Okay. This are the slides visible? Okay. Okay. So this is my agenda for today. I have 4 point agenda. Wherein, in the first, I would want to talk about introduction to research as a setting context, and then I will talk about the basic concepts of research design. Then, one area of research design that I think, particularly for research scholars and people are relatively new into research, would want to understand would be how we would need to have our designs framed with the different perspectives. That means the perspectives beyond, like me as researcher, there can be more perspectives which we need to incorporate while we are at that stage when we design our research. The third agent would be the basic classification of research design. Some of us might know it very well. Some of us think that we know, but we might have some issues there. Then finally, I cannot conclude before I talk about the potential sources of errors in research design. All right, with this large agenda, let us start with it. Sometimes you might feel that I am going a little fast than I should. Then you can first really slow down, because sometimes I might feel that you might have done that already. That is why I might want to hurry up to that. Okay. So I'll start with a common saying in research. Now, for some of you, this might not be very common, but I've read it a lot of places with a lot of standard textbooks on research methodology, research methods. It would talk about it. This says that there is a wide choice of alternative research designs that can meet the research objectives. Researchers probably maybe not very new into this journey. Maybe after some time we realize that there are a number of alternative research designs available that can suit our object. The issue we have to realize is that we have to objective here for the researchers to create that research design where you can enhance the value of the information of and the most important, reducing the cost of obtaining it. So with these parameters, let us go ahead. You would have done this already. Probably we know it so very well, but I would reiterate it. This is the simple, basic, linear uh, research process. So this is a very, very simple research. All of us who've done some sort of research would know that it cannot be this simple, it cannot be this linear, it cannot be this straight. When we start, theoretically say that there are these six stages. So, and you probably talked about them. Few stages yesterday. First is problem definition. You understand, when we define the problem, there can be a lot of ways in which you define it, and I'm not talking about it right now. Second is research approach development. Now, when you develop the approach, basically what we are doing is we're trying to build that context in which we will base our research. Maybe working upon the theoretical underpinnings, talking about the background, the context. That would be the development of research approach. Stage three is where in this stage we would be designing our research, and when we say we're designing the research, we are basically blueprint of the do's and the don'ts, and also partly of how our research start, how we will go ahead with it. So that would be the stage three, which will be the research design. So which would be the focus of today's session, mine. And then fourth stage probably where you do the field work or data collection of some sort. Stage five is data preparation and analysis, and then stage six is report preparation and presentation. Um, when you are at the onset, this process seems like a six-stage process and it is linear. But a lot of times in reality, what happens is there are backward loops, and there are dead ends, and then you reiterate. And if you were assess the research process with a stage in your research journey, you will realize it cannot be this simple. It cannot be a six-stage process. Okay. So with this background, let's talk about what exactly is the research design. It would only say that it is a framework or plan for conducting a research project, would detail all the procedures necessary for obtaining the information, also develop the insights upon how to conduct research using a particular research methodology. You would have to, at this point, as a researcher, when you're developing a research design, you will have to talk about, or actually you would have to inspect a lot of times, because you would be doing it mostly with your own self, identify the do's and the don'ts that you have to do before you actually jump into it and you try to work on your research questions. By this time, you would have some idea about what is the area, what is the concept, and what is the phenomena on which you are wanting to continue your research. You might have idea about your basic research questions. Some might have formulated hypotheses. Some of us might not be able, for a lot of reasons, which I would talk about little late, not be in a position to formulate those hypotheses. Still no basic research question, at least the phenomena that we want to study. And before I go ahead and work on a detailed research methodology, I would want to have an understanding what can be done here, what are the things which would lead me to a more quality, quality information, to a more comprehensive, realistic information in the time frame and in the budget frame that I have conducted research. So, basic functions of a research design, probably I would have already covered. First is provides a blueprint, it provides a framework. It is like detailed plan. Like for example, if you're going on a vacation, for example, in summer, you would want to know exactly where on would you go, what all would you detailed plan, and that is what is research design here. So, for example, what the research is about, what kind of data is required, and where will you be able to collect it? Maybe a physical location, maybe some information space, some database, some particular category of individual you might want to look for. It will at this stage give you an outline of the research so that you have that clarity of what is the scope of my work, what is I would be continuing further, what is not part of it. And also, if you've done it meticulous, if you prepared that plan well, comprehensive, and in advance, chances are that you might identify probable shortcomings. You might also be ready take on with them. That plan is well done. Although a lot of times when we are young researchers or when we are very new into the journey, a lot of times we have a thought that we will work it through. There would be a way. आगे देख लेंगे जो होगा हो जाएगा. And for some of the research projects that I did way back, I can shamelessly confess that a lot of times I did not do it. And there were times when I realized that if I have done it that ways in which we have taught research to have a plan, to have proposal ready, to have clear research designs, to interact with various stakeholders of the research, then you do it well. And unfortunately or fortunately, I'm reminded of a study wherein I was doing on some financial variables. So I went to my supervisor. He is a very nice person, but he is one with minimalistic intervention. So he would not intervene unless he is forced to intervene. So I went on and I told him that I want to do a study on these parameters. And what I will do is it's a very old story, so don't judge me on this. So I said I will take five small sample and I would pilot test my variables. He says, okay, you do that. So because I was doing it on financial data, I said I would pick up 30 companies listed on the BSc and I would pick up data from them. He asked me, okay, go ahead. So he asked me to come and pick the sample for your pilot. And I told him that I will take the 30 companies on the basis of market capitalization, best performing, which is very representative of the entire sample. Because if you understand, largest 30 would be a significant portion, almost 33 to 40% of the total market cap of BSc. If you're not from finance area, don't worry. What happened was I collected data, made so much, I did so much and preparing the model. That the best performance. It is so simple that you cannot run a regression on that. Um, and he told me, I knew it. It cannot work. It is a small sample, and that was few the students of few then regression would not work there. But you that theoretically at a point in time. ऐसा नहीं है कि मुझे ये बातें पता. I was so excited about that model, and it never worked. And retrospectively, now I realize if we would have worked on the research design and maybe talked to various people, then I would have realized same model. I took a 500 sample. I did not pilot test it. I collected data for 500 companies. And then I tested it and all my variables seemed significant. Got published into a very, very good journal. But I could not have done it the way I thought I would do it as a young researcher. Okay. With that, let's can I continue? I think we talked about the function of research. Basically, it will, if you've done it well, it will create boundaries and it will also tell you the do's and don'ts, what is to be avoided, what is it that you have to be careful about. Okay, then probably research design, four things we have to be careful about. It has to be neutrality is very, very important. And for us, a lot of us would be working in the on the primary data. How many of us feel will be working on primary data? Okay, and how many of us feel will be working on the secondary data? And others will work without data. And qualitative study is also based on data. So, qualitative source database. So, if we are planning to work on a primary data, particularly, then biases are very difficult to be avoided. There are various kinds of biases. A research own bias might come sometimes by asking the respondents a particular kind of questions, which they might not be ready to answer, or they might not have awareness about it. For example, if I'm asked my opinion about, let us say, um, ISRO space project and the rationale about the kind of money that they are spending, maybe I have an opinion. But if it's asked in a context where I have to immediately form an opinion. Right? Think example, you might know a lot of things, but once asked, we're very ready to give it. What can there would be a bias? So not only researchers bias, there can be respondents bias, there can be bias which might arise because of the wrong kind of context or the environment where the data is being collected, so on and so forth. There can be a lot of biases. So first primary objective would be to make sure there is as little bias or our research is as neutral as possible. Reliability and validity, the two big, I do not know, the biggest words that we face in research, and we will talk about a little later about reliability and validity. And validity and generalizations. Sometimes we do not pay attention to the generalizability because we are not worried as researchers a lot of times about generalizability. But we know what is generalization. Identifying or when you are reaching certain conclusions, certain findings based on small sample, then you want to have interpretation for the entire sample for a larger population. That would be generalization. So as long as all your fundamentals are intact, you might have a study which has a generalizability. Otherwise, that is also explained. So when we are and I will talk about liability and vulnerability a little later. Again, I mean, you might have heard about it yesterday, but I will do that again. So these are the four basic characteristics of research design. If you want me to talk about it, please stop me and ask me to do it. Okay. So these steps in research design, there I am you. You they will manage. They will manage. Okay. Okay. So there are six steps, basic steps in research design, and these steps would again be detailing the plan that we have. Step one is to consider the aims and approach of the research that you're planning. Step two would be choose a type of research design. Ideally, one might have talked about the various types of research design, the exploratory or the descriptive, the conclusive, and the various terms. I will talk about them in the third section. I'm currently in the first section. In the third section, I will talk about identify population and sampling method. Then step four would be to choose the data collection method. Step five would be to plan how you're collecting the data, which is the data collection procedure, and then you decide on the data analysis strategy. So these decision points there in your research design. When you go ahead with your research design, we are in that designing phase. This, which I talked about earlier, we're talking about only the third step in that process. And for that, you have these some one here on my slide is consider the aims and approaches of the research. Can we have? I do not know why there is this slide. I'm on the next slide. Network interruption. Okay. So in this step, you one when we talk about the first step, one might have an idea about the research questions that we want to investigate. One might not be in a position to formulate a hypothesis about these research questions. Hypothesis, we understand, is a testable statement which you can either establish or you can say that it is not possible. So whether it would be a strong relationship, a significant relationship, or a non-significant one, but you might not be at that stage where you have the hypothesis. You should be having your research questions, which are very, very clear. What maybe a broad idea about the phenomena that you are studying. Uh, these research ideas or the phenomena can have a lot of sources. You might observe as a researcher and understand there might be practical problems, a lot of applied research. For example, in business administration, there are problems which are identified me as well. You see that there are problems and then you are looking for these. There are you've gone through previous researchers which have identified certain areas. So we have that research question at this point that we which is ready. And if we are only at that stage when we have identified the phenomenon, we should at the first step try to have your research questions. For example, what are the factors that would lead to absenteeism, or maybe the factors that might reduce absenteeism, or absenteeism might be associated with various other negative behaviors. These would be the kind of research questions. Depending upon certain areas, you might have an hypothesis and you might not have an hypothesis. Um, at this point, you would also want to know whether it is interesting enough to be evaluated. If it does not incite a lot of interest. There might not be people who are interested in that research question, or you as researcher also don't feel strongly about it, then those are not the areas that you would want to step into. As a researcher, you should be passionate about what you're researching. You should be convinced that it has some genuine interest. People would be interested to read it or understand the phenomena. You also, because once you've committed, you'll be working on it for many, many years. Even if it is a small research paper, once you've written one and you've done well, you might try to draw subsequent researches from that. So only if you yourself are interested in that research question, you feel you would be interested in it for a long time, and there would be audience, then only it is interesting, and then only you should continue. Also, you will also look at the feasibility. There might be research questions which might be very interesting. For example, uh, daily lives of, let's say, various celebrities or CEOs, or leaders which are not in the limelight or media attention, might be very interesting to you. But will it be feasible, to, let's say, the basic daily activities of, let's say, Elon Musk? Not feasible. We would not be able to do it. And then also in that case, generalizability would not be there. So to look for the feasibility, you yourself as a researcher would have to look at the time that would be required to do a research. Maybe if I would want to look at how researchers' behavior change with their age, and then I want to look at a 20-year framework, maybe it's not feasible. The kind of money that is required, technical knowledge and skill, each research demands different kind of technical abilities, not just in terms of usage of software, but a lot of times we end up working on a lot of algorithms now, even if we don't want to, or even when this is a very basic social phenomena that we study. And therefore, at this, you would have to do a feasibility check, and one has to be very, very realistic about the feasibility, because if it is not feasible, um, burning your fingers would be a very, very bad idea. And as it is said, well begun is half done. And if I would want to flip the statement, it can only be understood that if it's not well begun, फिर आप negative zone में चले जाओगे. Step two is choosing a type of research design. Now, there are various kinds of research design. Broadly, you can say that there are three, but there can be so many classifications, and I will talk about it a little later. Okay. Step three would be to identify your population and the sampling method. Uh, I understand that you have a separate session dedicated to sampling, but still, as long as we understand that for a lot of reasons, we would also ideally want to study the entire population. A lot of times it is not possible because of, again, feasibility. You might not have all the resources, and therefore draw a subsample which is as representative of the population as possible. And that will help you to work with smaller data and then be able to generalize your findings. Again, this would require a lot of discussion, but I'm leaving it here. Data collection methods, there are so many methods, and these are just 10 mentioned here. There are so many more methods of connecting data. Uh, the most common, few most common ones that that we see are the forms and questionnaires which most of us are aware. Fish again is one method which is very, very useful in social science where you do not interfere, you just observe and see the pattern. Um, then focus group discussions. I am assuming we know all these terms, and if there are a few that I have to talk about, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm assuming that we know. Yes. Okay. First is okay. Second is okay. Third, okay. Fourth, not okay. Okay. Fourth, not okay. Fourth is document. These are so if you're working on a newer area, or sometimes if you're primarily working on the secondary data systems, then you would have access to a lot of documents, maybe organizational documents, company documents, government documents which can be used. Similarly, there are a lot of agencies which create reports. हमारे university में there are so many kinds of reports which are prepared that kind of authentic data is available, which used into your research, if, whether it is a secondary data research, a mixed method research, that can be used. With this focus group, sixth is oral history, where you talk, people talk, try to remember what, then they try to tell that. Combination research is when you are mixing more than one kind of data. Online packing is when you are obviously you looking at data through some website or some portal. The last two have emerged very recently. I can say that, you cannot say that because it emerged with you. Majority of you are in your 20s, I'm assuming. So online marketing analytics, social media monitoring are some of the examples. I now see a lot of research on data taken from LinkedIn, data taken from Twitter, even Instagram data, Facebook data, YouTube viewership data. There are a lot of processes that generate data automatically. Earlier, maybe आज से 10 साल पहले, researchers would have to create ways to generate data. Nowadays, a lot of data is generated automatically through a lot of processes, which actually led to a lot of analytics and big data and what all that we see. So that happens. So online thing is when you're making purchases online, and then they track your data. They would have data about the kind of payment methods that you chosen, the kind of purchases, the category. They also have your demographic information. They might also have a lot of other details if they have your Aadhaar data, or maybe they have your geographical locations. So a lot of data, much more than we understand, is there when we're making a small purchase on any of the platforms. And a lot of times, say I'm making a purchase on Amazon, they might have the data, or they might have access to the data as to what other websites I'm making purchases on, what other categories I am purchasing. Maybe as an educationist, I'm looking at some academic resources, I'm buying some textbooks or some other gadgets for my use. Maybe as a parent, I'm buying some other set of products, maybe some for my individual use. What the data is there, it is available, and it is collated. And as a researcher, if you have that kind of funding, or if you have that kind of support, then all that data is available. वो ethics और integrity तो वो हम पढ़ लेते हैं और पढ़ा लेते हैं, डेटा बहुत तरीके से जनरेट होता है. When you're talking about areas where there is money, branding, merchandising, advertising, there's a lot of money and then there's a lot of data. Okay. white side, black side, gray side, all these kinds of research that happens. मैं यहाँ से नहीं बोल सकती, but probably a lot of us might hear it. So, group interviews is a data collection method wherein what happens is you usually invite a group of people, usually from let's say 6 to 8, maximum of 10 people, and then you encourage them to talk about an issue. For example, let us say we want to talk about the development of social infrastructure in Lucknow, and we call people who have certain exposure or who have certain idea about it, and then we ask questions. This is a data collection method where the researcher has to be very skilled, and therefore he has to navigate discussion so that he is able to collect all the information. The advantage here would be that people would feel agency. reproduced. And validity would mean actually measuring what you are wanting to measure. That is it reliability and validity taking one step more because no research can be successful, it will find its meaningful end without addressing these questions. Reliability, validity, कहीं भी जाके आप प्रेजेंट करेंगे, एडिटर हो जाएगा, even when it is very very obvious, you would be asked these questions. Reliability क्या है और validity क्या है? Therefore, we should be very sure of all these questions that are written here, and we should also know the answer for ourselves. We should be very, very sure. A lot of times, our research supervisors, co-contributors might not be worried about these questions, and a lot of times we do not talk about it. हो सकता है आपके सुपरवाइजर आपसे पूछे ना कि वैलिडिटी कैसा मेजर किया, रिलायबिलिटी कैसे मेजर किया, आर यू श्योर अबाउट, but you as a researcher have to be very, very sure. Otherwise, it will hurt when you least expect it. And it will. Okay? Your reliability would mean, does your measure capture the same concept consistently over time? Okay? With the time, वो concept, the understanding of the concept should not change. If you change the context, will it produce the same results? That is important, because if that does not happen, that will scope the generalizability. For example, if I have, let us say, a schedule or an instrument or a questionnaire to measure the behavior, or let's say response to how uh, maybe a supervisor instructs the student, research scholar, maybe my schedule that I have picked up might work differently for women students vis-a-vis male students. Also, for example, it might work differently if I administer it, maybe let us say in then School of Economics or maybe other colleges, vis-a-vis if I go and administer it, the same instrument at, let us say, Faisalabad University. It might not work. And therefore, if it is not working, giving me similar results in different contexts, then that is putting a question to my reliability. All the questions may measure the exact same concept, again, part of my reliability. And then validity, do your questions, measurement material test all aspects of the concept, whether you covered every little dimension of that concept or not, and whether it correlates with different measures of the same concept. Now, this understanding has to be important. For this, one has to have put in effort into your literature review. All right, because from there we get a lot of understanding about the concept and various dimensions of that concept. Again, a word of caution here that as young researchers, we know about a lot of AI tools which will generate literature review for us, right? I'm not talking about the ethics. Uh, I'm tempted. I'm right now not talking about it. I'm also not saying whether it can be done, not done. If you've done some kind of research, you know how things work. But if you heavily relied upon some softwares to do literature review for it, a lot of times we might not have a thorough understanding of the concept. Literature review software prepare the document for you, but the software cannot put the information into your head. And when at this stage, you need to develop that thought process. Be very, very sure the supervisor does not read it. No matter who is the supervisor, he does not have the time, the patience, the motivation, the energy to read the concept. He is not read it. The software would have done it. Sometimes the software has its own limitations, and therefore when you come to areas when your model does not give you the desired results, when something is surprise element comes out from your data analysis, then you would be stuck because you do not know ये क्यों हो गया, ये कैसे हो गया. Because this happens a lot of time in research that it gives you surprises. So you, if you don't want them, so you want those surprises, invest again here, horror with your literature. Next is planning your data collection procedures. Yeah, I'm coming to continuing with operationalization. Operationalization for some areas is very, very important. What I'm meaning is from an abstract concept, you come to measurable variables. That is again very, very important. If if that operationalization does not happen correctly, then your findings and your interpretation would also be similarly incorrect. For example, let us say if I want to know the, let's say, effectiveness of learning in this room right now, can I operationalize it with your physical attendance? Let us say that out of X number of participants, Y were present, so the learning was successful. Will this be a good operationalization? Can your physical presence be a measure of your learning? I don't want the answer, but can you think of how you can operationalize? If my research question was to understand the learning happening right now, please don't give me the answer. But think about it. Physical presence नहीं हो सकता. Number of minutes you are sitting with me नहीं हो सकता. Number of minutes you're not looking at your phone हो सकता है नहीं हो सकता. फिर कैसे हो सकता है? Uh, I've put a very, very similar example here. To measure last point is to measure teacher satisfaction. It is talking about my satisfaction. Okay. And then finally, you talk about data analysis strategies. Very, very important. Till here, we only talk about data and its collection. But we understand raw data can be of very, very little use. When we were young, तो हम ऐसे आई चार्ट और बार चार्ट बना के प्रोजेक्ट बना लेते थे. बट it is not an acceptable way of doing research. So you will have to plan how you would want to analyze your data, and that is to be done at the research design stage, because here you would have to think about what is the variability, for example, what are my hypotheses, for example, and how I'm going to analyze it. For example, let us say I'm talking about a behavior where my variable of interest, let's say, is a binary variable, a yes, no, pass, fail. And I want to do, I plan to do a basic regression test to see the impact on that binary variable. Let us say, uh, uh, if uh, if you're sitting more here, then you become good researcher. Let's say we have a good researcher and a not so good researcher. Binary variable, and I'm talking about the number of hours you sit in your classroom. Trying to make a regression framework, regression model, I should know that my regression would assume underlying normality of all the variables. If I feel my variable being binary cannot be normally distributed, then either I have to look for a different data analysis technique, or I have to look at a different measure. Operationalization variable here is incorrect. Maybe I convert it into a scale or a measure where I have that kind of a variability on my dependent variable. Am I making sense? Am I still making sense? Okay. Point of research visit, you would have to think about how you will be analyzing the data and, and be conscious of that technique while you are planning how you're going to select that data. So so these basically all these terms that I've put in here, be conscious about your variability, your calculation, your hypothesis, maybe regression, correlation, ANOVA, choice of statistical tests. This would be applicable only quantitative data. A lot of us, I am assuming, are going planning to work on the quantitative data, but we also should be aware that there is a large section of research which cannot be done on quantitative data because a lot of things in social science cannot be quantified that way. Not there's no data. When you go into a qualitative study, data has to be there, but you're measuring it differently. And then there can be various other methods of research. The common ones are the content analysis. Although in one of the studies that I did very, very recently, I, I did a content analysis. And what I did was I downloaded, now there is this report which is called as the BRSR, Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report. So large organizations in India have published it. And we collected all these reports and we identified themes or areas which were interesting to us. We did a content analysis of a large number of BRSR reports in the Indian context, and we measure the value of those variables. From qualitative technique, we extracted quantitative data. This extracted quantitative went as an independent variable to model that I just listed. So again, that is also done very very commonly. कि आप qualitative data को quantitative जगह पे लेके जाओ, not the absolutes, but you do it. So content analysis, when you have a document, a report, or some kind of document, you identify words or areas, you measure it, and then you use it independently. You can use it in some other model. Narrative is when people talk about their story, they tell about what happened, you record it, and then you try to understand their behavior. That is a narrative analysis. Discourse would be when people are discussing, and then you're trying to identify what turns into it, their attitude from that would be a discourse analysis. Then you look at documents, identify prominent themes, and look at how they interact with each other. That is a thematic analysis. Grounded theory has come up in a very, very big way. We use grounded theory in various kinds of research. If somebody is interested, I can talk about it in a little more detail. Otherwise, I'll just skim through it. Yes. Okay, thank you. Grounded theory is an approach wherein you're working on an area where there's nothing. So you're working on a phenomena which has not been studied before, or it is very new phenomena. There are not much identified variables. Maybe there is no standard instrument to measure it. Um, and there are not a lot of published researches. Then what you do is you go and you talk to people for an idea about it, or you try to be available actually present while that phenomena is happening, then you take down observations. For example, can you think of some area which has not been studied at all? Um, mm, mm, mm. Now, I do not know. Okay. First, talk about physics, then I'll comment about yours. Talk about cyclone as a phenomena, and if I have a strong cyclone affecting livelihood, if there is no such study done, if your literature, so see if it's not been done at all, huh, if if you want to work on a phenomena at geographical location, and if it is done somewhere else, then that becomes the basis. And then it would not be correct to use a grounded theory approach. Or if that phenomena in that particular geography is unique and uncomparable to the one which has been already studied, then you can do a grounded theory. And then what you will do, you will go and talk to the experts in that area, and talk to them, identify the patterns, the behavior, document it, and you continue doing it, you get saturation till you stop getting more information, and then from there you build your. Okay. This is a very good starting point if you have no other starting point, and very, very respected method now. And your example was crime in wildlife. If again from my literature review, I strongly believe that I've got only 20 minutes. Okay. So if you strongly believe there is any study which has been done, then you will do the same approach, because here observation method would not work. It will not, you cannot go and observe it while it is happening. So you will have to fully again go to the experts and talk about it. Provided there isn't any existing research. Same thing. If you think your geography makes it very, very unique, then you can do a grounded study. But see, if you replicate the study from one context to the other, the publication बहुत difficult है. Replicating a study would not give you a good publication unless you create that niche. Publication will not happen, and then there's no point doing the research if you're not publishing it, right? I have to run. I have completed one section. I have three sections. I think I can do justice to one. There are three that is left. One is research design from different perspectives. Is the classification of research design. And three is the sources of truth. Any choice, or I take mine. Any other? Okay. I think. Okay, then I will. My favorite will be talking about research design from different perspectives, because you would not find it a lot, but Janata, then I will not be able to cover up the time. I will not allow to speak. Over DC, पीछे से इतनी बातें चल रही है. They can go for tea break. Okay. Research design till now. Not research design only from our perspective, the researcher's perspective. The research design has to be categorically read from two more perspectives, जिसकी बात कोई नहीं करता, हम भी ध्यान नहीं देते, बाद में वो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट लगता है. Two, one is decision maker and the second is participant. Decision maker would be the individual who would be making the decision based on your research. For example, if it is a commission study, if you are doing a study which is funded by some agency, all right, maybe cyclone का study है, wildlife का study है, that there might be funders, कोई government agency है जो उसको fund कर रहा है, and they would be making decisions based on their study. Then there might be decision makers whose perspective becomes very important. Second, if you're doing a primary study, then participants' perspective becomes extremely important, and I will have to talk about it. First, the decision makers. Decision makers' perspective, you have to make sure that there are five things. First is that all the information that you are generating is accurate. And when we say accurate for the decision maker, then it has to be most valid representation from the most reliable measurement and sufficiently sensitive to the differences in the individuals being measured. When we are careful of these three parameters, most valid, most reliable, and most sensitive information, then you can say that your information generated to the research is accurate. It has to be correct, sufficient. It has to be complete. If you're studying a phenomena and you only focus on a part, then decisions have to be made out of, then it would not be leading to complete, accurate decisions. Available would mean that the data that you generated, the information you generated, the research findings that you generated have to be available to the decision makers, all the other stakeholders that are related, and then it has to be relevant. The information should be able to make sense to decision making. This is important if you have a decision maker. If it is a commission study, probably has paid you to do that study, they would be using those findings for certain further decision making and so on. That from the participants' perspective, now this is huge. 15 minutes, I don't know. This is huge. From the participants' perspective, see, when we are collecting data, when we're studying a phenomenon, there are a lot of dimensions to the phenomenon. On the extreme left side, you see information can be private or it can be public. Private would mean only if it is about me, only I know it. And if it's public, they know that information. Maybe your attendance, your physical appearance, how you talk to X and how you talk to Y, those would be public information. No, a lot private information about myself. No, public, no other person would know. Then there can be communicable information and there can be non-communicable information. Communicable information is something that can be communicated. Maybe can talk about it, maybe how I dress up, how I go to college, how I study, all that is private, public information and it's communicable information. Information might private information, but it can be communicable as well. If you ask what time do I go to bed, how many meals they have in a day, or what kind of movies I like, what kind of food I like, private, but it could still communicable information. Lot information which is private is also non-communicable. Maybe if you're talking about, let us say, your relationship with your research supervisor, private and non-communicable, lot of times. And next layer would be aware and unaware. Lot of information about you are aware about. You as an individual. It might be public, it might be private, it might be communicable or non-communicable. You are aware about it. So note your information you might not be aware about. You never thought about it. And I'll give you examples to talk about it. And on these three parameters, there can be four layers that can be constructed. If you can look on the fourth column from left, you have layer one. I'm calling it layers, and I will talk about each of them a little detail. Layer one, layer two, layer three, and layer four. From layer one, which is spontaneous, recent, and conventional. कौन सा सॉफ्ट ड्रिंक मुझे अच्छा लगता है, कौन सा सेल फोन में यूज करती हूँ, layer one. And last would be unconscious repressed by maybe I do some activity which I do. Why do I talk to people in some way which I might not even thought about it? Would be the last layer. Now, each information that you are studying, new phenomena, right? Every time the layer of that phenomena changes, you incorporate it in your research. Will you? Yes, and it will also make it feasible. I will give you examples, a lot of examples right now. First layer, let me talk about the first layer. The response is spontaneous, reasoned, and conventional. Simple question, आपको पता है, आपसे पूछना चाहे तो आप जवाब दे सकते हो. That is layer one. I'll give you an example. Now, this was a research which was conducted in the Festival of Speed in a show called Moving Motor Show, obviously in US. So what happened is it was by invite show. People were invited, people came, bought tickets, and then enjoyed the show and then went back. This time they were sent these questionnaires. I think it was sent online, and then they were asked about a very in-depth question from participants about attitudinal, behavioral, and demographic questions because they were very passionate about that. That is why they went there and they remembered it very very well. You ask them questions, कौन सा मॉडल आपको अच्छा लगा, क्या नहीं अच्छा लगा, क्या और होना चाहिए. Willing, they were ready, they were willing. उनको, they knew it, they wanted to talk about it. Simple question, and they got a huge response. 77 completed questionnaire. Questionnaire email. That was the research design. All right, layer one. If you have layer two, which is responses concealed and personal, which means questions are more personal and more sensitive. Now, so working in layer two, all right, it is not layer one. पता है, आराम से बात कर सकते हैं. That is not the scene here. Self is something which is either second point, private, sacred, stressful aspect of one's life. That is private. Research supervisor relationship and sensitive. Real or perceived stigma associated with the रियल बट स्टिग्मा. ठीक, वो बहुत अच्छे से खुल के बात नहीं कर सकते उसके बारे में. क्वेश्चन बहुत अच्छा है, बहुत अच्छा है, सब टाइम देता है, काम मेरा करता है, एवरीथिंग. बट देन दैट वुड बी रॉन्ग रिसर्च मेथडोलॉजी. डिजाइन गलत है. क्वेश्चनर बनाया, ऑनलाइन भेज दिया. रिसर्च सुपरवाइजर रिसर्च रिलेशनशिप, व्हाट वुड बी फाइंडिंग्स? All incorrect findings, right? Let's see. Now, this real research, I've not put in all the information yet. I will tell you. So, this was again a study done by a brand, which was a personal hygiene brand, and but they were not sure if people would be very open to talk about it because of the embarrassment or the reluctance in disclosing their very intimate information. So, what happened was that here, um, I'm reading it out. The second point was the key challenge for the research was to ensure that unease, embarrassment, or reluctance in disclosing this information is minimized. इसके लिए क्या करेंगे कि fourth point, the introduction advised participants of the sensitive nature and stressed that researchers were not intending to cause any stress. Was first. Firstly, what they had an introduction where they were told that we not our objective is not offend you. If you're not willing, you can skip the answer, don't answer. If you want to stop it, you can discontinue it, you can return unfilled question. So to create an ease. And then funnel approach was used wherein less sensitive questions asked first so that rapport was built and they gradually sensitivity of the question was increased. It was a funnel base. And gradually that because of that built rapport that was that questionnaire was able to be built that way. And a lot of times the participants did not wanted to answer it in the presence of a respondent. So an online approach was used. It was also able to remove the interviewer bias from that because maybe with his presence or with his body gesture of the interviewer, there was chances the bias and therefore this kind of a research was done. And again, this was a very, very successful research. If you look, should be able to get the research. I've kept the title the same. Third layer, response is intuitive and imaginative. They they're not aware about it. For example, um, you want to talk about you're launching a new product and you want to talk about whether uh, what features in that product will they like. For example, let's say you want to let's say that we like as Indians we like a lot of spicy flavors, but it has not been experimented in ice creams. Let us say hypothetically a brand wants to invest in developing an ice cream flavor hypothetically with some spice content. And now I'm coming and wanting to know your insights to it. You would have think and imagine. You do not know how it will taste, right? That would be the layer three. Okay. This again very famous research by the title What the Nose Knows. They were doing a research on fragrance brands. The problem with fragrance is it is very difficult to remember and very difficult to articulate. If you're asked to differentiate between 5 fragrances, you might have your opinion. ये बहुत अच्छी है, ये बहुत बुरी है, ये ओके ओके है, ये पार्टी के लिए ठीक है, ये कॉलेज के लिए ठीक है. If you want asked to explain it, will you be able to do it? The researchers identified it, but it was very difficult because people did not have words to describe smell, why they like it or they don't like it. It's layer three. So words like fresh and clean were universally used. So what they did, questionnaire was not working there, could not work. ठीक है ज्यादा से ज्यादा अच्छा बुरा बता सकते थे, clean unclean, fresh not so fresh ऐसा कुछ बता सकते थे, but that would not make a lot of sense. And therefore what they did was they drew a bank of about 100 pictures and some phrases, descriptive words. Second last point is talking about the 100 pictures. And the last point is talking about a bank of descriptive words. And then they ask the respondents to choose. From a set of pictures, concept picture would be most associated with your experience of that skill. And then they had a battery of words to describe, and then they were asked to choose words to describe. And that way, again, a very famous research business that was able to be conducted for layer three, which could not have been done through a schedule or an observation or a questionnaire. Okay, and layer fourth is when response is unconscious and repressed. They participants are not able to conceptualize and not able to express. And what they do then is they go to not a standardized work. And this is again a very good story. So brands like Absolute and Red Bull last have flopped in this area because they tried to do it with focus group interviews. They conducted focus group interviews to understand the behavior of the customers and they failed terribly. On the other, what Nike did was they made a radical change by uh, being able to sell their sports goods to non-sports people. That's an achievement which Nike was able to deliver. Its strong research support. And what they did was they evaluated visual cues and emotional stimuli associated with its brand. Very simply collecting data, but trying to develop that insight of the customer and how the brand was experienced on a sensory level. Because when other organizations who had done a similar research, for example, the Red Bull tried to capture that sensory stimulus and emotional connect with the brand, but doing it through work. They tried focus group, but they failed terribly because their research findings were not consistent. Therefore, Nike tried it, doing it through an observational method where they look at how people are experiencing their brand, trying to draw observation from that qualitative kind of data collection method, and with those they were able to very well sell. If they were only selling these sports products to sports, they would not have created that base. To create, be able to create that base, they were able to sell it across category. And this was happened because of the fourth layer. Um, can an example? This is a Mexican research company. They were trying to understand the on real people, how they commuted, what were their challenges, how they were making those decisions, like commuting from their homes to their workplace, vice versa, mostly. So they made three teams. One was they made a research taxi in which they took participants to get respondents from their workplace to their homes or vice versa. Then the research driver would collect their behavior, क्या अच्छा है, क्या बुरा है, क्या problems आती है. That way they were able to understand why and when they would take a cab or otherwise. सेकेंड मेथड उन्होंने थोड़ा प्राइवेट वैन्स लिया लोगों को उसमें बिठाया while they were going उनका फोकस को डिस्कशन करा and the third was that they were conducting shadowing which is observation and interviews way passengers during their cockpit. And with these three different approaches, what they were be able to do is get the insight of how people are commuting and how the product can be designed so that it can be sold successfully to next people. And can I? Okay. Then I will conclude all this. What all this? The second part of my discussion, wherein I'm talking about collecting information, being aware of various other stakeholders in my research. There are three important dimensions. First is the context for the environment where the participant is observed. In the previous case, the taxi or the van where they were asked questions, or sometimes doing it online would be better, like in case of a personal intimate product brand, or sometimes let us say when you're wanting to maybe research about, let us say, the environment of the restaurant, then a good idea would be to bring the respondent to that place so that you're able to ask questions. If you ask him sitting in a lecture hall, what is an environment in a restaurant that you like, you would not have accurate findings. Second, I'm taking the double on the left needs to issue under investigation as perceived by the participant. Remember the four layers that we talked about in the classification of information that we did. That is important. And finally, you have the nature of the participants. These three will interact, let you know what would be the right research. Okay. And with this, we come to the formal classification of the research design. Okay. Probably a very comprehensive one. You can still find variants which are not mentioned here. Research design, those sections with vital exploratory and conclusive. Exploratory is when you do not have a very strong existing research base. The phenomena is not very researched. Naya phenomena hai, or there is not very clear research question. There is some ambiguity. You are ready with an informal, semi-structured kind of a research process. Then that is an exploratory research design. Now, for an exploratory research design, you can either have a qualitative exploration or you can have quantitative exploration. Ideally, an exploratory research design will tend uh, the concrete outputs, which might be an indication to the conclusive research design if you're looking for a good publication. Just exploring the area, then in its own self, that might be the findings. Conclusive research design is more structured, it is more formal, it is backed by a more rigorous literature review, and it usually has um, hypotheses which are testable, and then your objective is either to approve or disprove hypothesis. They can be again done in two ways. Descriptive is when you're only trying to describe it, you're only trying to understand. That is descriptive. And when you are very brave and very ambitious and you want to establish a cause and effect relationship between one thing leads to the other, then that is called as a causal research. A word of caution, correlation is not causality, association is not causality. Two things happening together cannot be causality. For example, let us say if it is very, very hot in here in the city and all the children that are born in all the hospitals, large proportion of them are boys, can we statistically say that if there is a very hot weather in Lucknow, then you have more boys being born in the city? Causality cannot be equated with association or correlation, two things happening together. That is not causality. So very, very difficult to be proven. हम बहुत तरीके से करते हैं, but theoretically very, very difficult to be proven without an experimental research design. Descriptive can again be cross-sectional or it can be longitudinal. When you collect data at one point of time, that is called as cross-sectional. When you collect data from the same individual, from the same entity, multiple times, that is called as longitudinal research design. Again, cross-sectional research design, there can be a single cross-section and there can be a multiple cross-section. एक बार क्लिक करेंगे तो वो सिंगल क्रॉस सेक्शन होगा, दो तीन बार डेटा कलेक्ट करेंगे तो मल्टीपल क्रॉस सेक्शन होगा. Here there would be different respondents each time, unlike longitude. I have a lot of examples. Can I talk about the examples of the theory? Example. Okay. हाँ. बिल्कुल. This is research which was done by LG Electronics in Japan, probably Japan. This was done in Japan. No, no, Europe. This was done in Europe. I'm sorry. So what they did was they wanted to know how people are using their kitchen equipments, washers and vacuum cleaners. So what they did not was gave them a questionnaire because this was an exploratory study. They did not give them questionnaires. They, with their permissions, they installed cameras and other equipments to record their behavior. A lot of times it was motion sensitive. ऐसा नहीं वो 24 घंटे on था. And a lot of times with the permission of the respondent, it can be switched on and switch off. For example, if it is in some part of your house or somewhere you do not want it to be on all the time, you have that option. Collected information, behavior of how people are using it, and then they will be able to differentiate the product, target the product and sell it with a right behavior. So this is one example of an exploratory study which was done by LG Electronics. Okay. This called television motivations. This was done by Corning Display Technologies. We probably know Corning is a glass brand which were doing this study uh, for television brands. And what they did was they surveyed 2,500 respondents from various countries of the world, identifying people who had indicated a likelihood of purchasing TV and LCD TV in the next 4 years. So first, what they did was that they had a qualitative research, which was grounded in the motivational theory, motivation for making a purchase decision, and qualitative research suggested that people had several customer concerns and interests that might have an impact on TV preferences, especially across the countries being studied. From qualitative dimension, they developed a questionnaire, a survey, which gave them discrete choices to measure preferences for different types of TV sets. So what's happening here is that they were looking at people who were interested to buy TV sets. And then first they did an exploratory study. Based exploratory study, they had findings, used the findings to develop survey, and then administered that survey to a very, very large audience, 2,500 respondents. अगर आपने कभी डेटा कलेक्ट किया तो you can understand 2,500 respondents huge. So I'm leaving the slides with you. A lot of them would have real research segments and it will have the study in detail. If you look at the titles for these studies, they might be available online. And if you see it, I would be there next door in the Department of Physics Administration. You're most welcome to visit. Thank you.